What is up, everybody? Welcome into episode 6. I can no longer use my fingers. Of I'll Say This with Chris Castellani. I am your host, Chris Castellani. Interesting show coming up. A lot of news broke this week. Much of it either Detroit and or Detroit Lions related, and we will discuss all of that. Going to talk some Tigers stuff. It was a bit of a bizarre week on Tigers Twitter. A lot of it involving guys who are on social media but don't participate in that nonsense, Riley Green and Spencer Torkelson. We're going to talk all about that, but I do want to start with the Detroit Lions-related stuff. The HBO docuseries, Hard Knocks, which chronicles the times, the goings-on of one football team in training camp a year, has decided that the team that they will be focusing on in 2022 will be the Detroit Lions. I'm going to talk more about that in a second because I do have a fair amount to say, but I'm going to actually start with the next big piece of news, which broke several hours later. It was a crazy day, and I think it actually broke several hours after I recorded this show, but that's fine. It wasn't earth-shattering enough news for me to go back and re-record anything, but the NFL Draft will be held in Detroit, Michigan in 2024. I'm amazed at how big of a deal drafts have become. Even when you look back 20, 25 years ago at, the typical NFL draft back then. I mean, it was so blasé compared to what it is now. Now it's a huge event. Full disclosure, I'm not a huge draft guy. Even in baseball, I know a lot of people thought I was this huge prospect, not genius. Nobody ever thought I was a genius, but, this guy who was in touch with, who the Tigers were going to take in the draft. Not really. Part of the reason, truly, why I wanted them to tank for Torkelson so bad was because outside of him, there was not a whole lot of guys in that draft that I really paid attention to or heard of. I mean, there were certain guys, because I watched the College World Series every year. Like, I knew certain players. I knew who Alex Faedo was when the Tigers took him. But in general, I don't like to focus on the draft because it means that the team I root for probably isn't very good. You know what I look forward to with the Tigers? The day that I don't have to worry about the draft anymore because I'm more focused on the good on-field product that they're putting out. It's different in the NFL. The NFL draft has become this massive event. Now, despite my cynicism there, I think this is really, really great. And outside of me not being a huge draft guy, I'm just happy that major sporting events, which despite the fact that a sport isn't played, the NFL draft has become a sporting event. I'm glad that those events are finally being held in Detroit again. And this is a hot button issue that I'll say up front, I don't know a ton about regarding the growth in downtown Detroit. There have been many a think piece written regarding people's frustrations toward Chris Ilitch, who promised one thing with District Detroit and then gave him another. And by another, I mean, from what I've heard, a lot of parking lots. I'm not going to go down that road. I'll say, though, that over the last 5 years, just the heart of downtown Detroit. I'm not talking about the surrounding areas. I'm just talking the heart of downtown Detroit, the stadium district, so to speak. While maybe it's not where it should be, it is substantially nicer than it was 5-10 years ago at this point. 5-10 years ago, Detroit was not a city that could have held an NFL draft. I really believe that. So I think that this is wonderful for the fans. I think that it's great for the city that they can embrace this. They still have a long ways to go. Detroit does, but the fact that major events are being held in Michigan and in Detroit again, I think it's really, really wonderful, and it makes me happy, regardless of how I feel about the draft as a whole. It's a huge event in the city of Detroit. I think it's a good start. Now, we still, in my opinion, have a ways to go until we're doing something like holding the Big Ten championship game in Detroit, which has kind of been rumored. I'm not crazy about that at this point. A part of that is I love Indy, but yeah, it's good to see things starting to come back. It's very important because as a diehard Detroit sports fan, as time has gone on, especially since Barstool, but even before that, my attachment to Detroit as a city has grown. And I want good things to happen to the city and not just the sports teams. So I think it's awesome to see the NFL draft in Detroit here in 2 years. As for Hard Knocks, I've watched Hard Knocks in the past. It's a well-done HBO series, and I'm sure this will be well done as well. I'll watch it. It promotes Detroit, hopefully, and you get to see maybe, at least what they're willing to show, the inner workings of the organization, which could be very, very unique, and it could be very, very sad, potentially, as well. But I am intrigued to watch it. I think the one point that it drives home, though, is that the current people in charge of the Detroit Lions, not the owners, because no one's ever going to really approve of them. I mean, we're talking about 60 years of failure here. I'm talking about Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes. The one point it drives home is that if you're going to be bad, which the Lions will be for at least another 2 years, if they're good by year 3, then Brad Holmes should, I would vote that guy president of the United States. I mean, the previous regime with Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia left the cupboard completely bare. So I'm thinking it's going to be at least another 2 years before they're even competitive. But if you're going to be bad, at least be interesting. At least be bad with personality. I think that the previous regime, Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia, one of the many reasons, I mean, the biggest reason why people hated them is they lost a bunch of games. But one of the many reasons why people couldn't stand them was the fact that these were two personality-less people, two people that came across as very pretentious. Like, they were just not good in press conferences, and they became boring. The Lions became really boring, and I think that's why a lot of people turned on them, and people were mad. I mean, there have been worse Lions regimes. Like, there was an 0-16 regime, right? But I would say Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia was the most hated. They were the most hated personalities, and it was one of the only Lions eras in which you didn't feel like they were really good necessarily, but you felt like there was more there, and they still somehow did less. Now, don't get me wrong. Give me the most boring GM and coach in the history of football. If they're winning 12 games a year, nobody's going to care. But it's accepted right now that the Lions aren't going to be winning 12 games a year. They have a long ways to go before they're even competitive. And Brad Holmes, who I'll talk about here in a second, but even more so Dan Campbell, they're needle movers. They're interesting personalities. And I think there was a strategy there regarding why Dan Campbell was hired, because you buy yourself some time when you have a likable personality at the helm. You do. That stuff does matter. It's like being a politician. Like, despite all the experience and, or in Dan Campbell's case, lack of experience, people will be willing to buy into a system if they like you. And I think that is the case for the time being with Dan Campbell. And that leads me kind of to my thoughts about the rebuild as a whole. Look, I like Brad Holmes. I think Brad Holmes, up to this point, I'd give him an A for what he's done in Detroit. He was given nothing. He had the balls to pull the string on the Stafford deal, a deal that I liked. Yes, Matt Stafford went to LA and won a Super Bowl in his first year. There was an expectation that was going to happen. I don't think anyone was really like shocked by that. Had he have gone to Carolina and done it, I think people would have went, "Whoa, no way!" But he went to LA with one of the most talented teams in football, and arguably maybe not the best coach in football. That's still probably Belichick, but one of the top 3 coaches in football, and Sean McVay, and he went to Super Bowl in year 1. You had to move on, though. You had to move on. Every other piece from that era, which was not a good era of Lions football, I don't know if there was such a thing, but at least a competitive era of Lions football, was gone. Darius Slay, gone. Calvin had retired long before that. Golden Tate, gone. So many pieces from the offensive and defensive lines, gone. You had to move on from Stafford, and Brad Holmes had the spine to do it. I liked the return they got, and hey, jury's still out. Maybe they'll fumble the draft picks. I don't know, but so far, I like that move. They went out, they got a really good offensive tackle in Penei Sewell. I mean, a very impressive pick, and what I liked about that too, especially, in hindsight, it wasn't the sexy pick. The sexy pick would have been the quarterback, but when you're in a rebuild and you're trying to hit in your first pick, you got to go with the right guy. Maybe not always the guy that has the highest ceiling. That's why I'm against Malik Willis. I talked about that a few episodes ago. Really like that pick. Amon-Ra St. Brown in the 4th round had a very good rookie year a season ago. Could be the Deebo Samuel of this Lions team. I like the way that Dan Campbell used him in the latter part of the season. I approve of the job the GM has done so far. Now, that's happened in the past too, where the first few years are good and then they fall apart. If they stumble with the next couple drafts, all the goodwill they've built up, it's gone. But I like him, and I think the city and the fan base as a whole is accepting of him thus far and likes the job that he's done. And I think fans, for the most part, like Dan Campbell as well. And that is interesting because Detroit Lions fans, I think, are probably the most divided fan base in Detroit. Now, that is not an insult. When you root for the single worst sports franchise in the history of professional sports, at least over the last 50 years, one that has not won a playoff game in my lifetime, of course you're divided. Everyone's going to be divided. It's not fun, but it seems like oddly, despite coming off of a 3-win season, which that's whatever, nobody expected anything out of them anyway, it seems like there's more unity at this point than I expected there would be. Now, I think part of that is unity through trauma. The previous regime with Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia was such a mess and so boring that it's brought people together just seeing Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell kind of go about their business. But it seems like there's two camps of people with Dan Campbell right now, and both of them are relatively positive. One is the people who are all in. They love the rhetoric. They love the bite in the kneecaps. He doesn't take himself too seriously. He loves football. He loves Detroit. The players love playing for him. Hey, they had a couple tough losses. He's going up there. He's tearing up at press conferences. He's self-aware. He's blaming himself. There are people who are all in. I would say that's maybe around 50% of the fan base at this point. And then there's the other 50% right now that is like me, who has some serious questions. Those people like me may not be all in, but they're willing to wait. There were issues last year. I mean, the Thanksgiving game was a disaster. They blew some leads, but for the most part, it was widely accepted. No matter who was coaching that team, the talent just wasn't there for them to win more than 3, 4, 5 games. And people talk about the fact that the culture is changing. People are talking about the fact that there's more accountability. The players seem happier. Again, I think a big reason for that has to do with the fact that the previous regime was just such a mess that the culture was awful. Nobody wanted to be there. That's why so many people left or got traded or got released or went to other teams. It was not a fun place to be. And people have talked about the changing of the culture in Detroit when it comes to the Lions. Now, I have a hard time believing that, and it really has nothing to do with Dan Campbell. It's just because of the Fords' involvement, and they just cast such a big dark cloud over everything that pertains to Lions football that it's hard for me to buy into the idea that the culture has changed. But I do think that players, generally speaking, are happier than they were under previous regimes, especially the previous regime with Quinn and Patricia. But Neil Rule, who does a show on Woodward Sports, did a really good segment about this where it's like, look, if you want to talk about the culture changing, players being happier, a coach being more affable and likable, that's all fine. But I'm not going to buy any of that until they start winning games. I was a firm believer from day one that A.J. Hinch was the perfect guy to manage the Detroit Tigers. And even when they were 6-24 a season ago, I still felt like, all right, this is not a culture issue. It's just a talent issue. Now, where the rest of the world started to come towards my side was the fact that they played at an 85-win pace the last 4 months of the season. All of a sudden, all the things that I talked about with A.J. Hinch regarding the changing in culture came true, and people were starting to buy in again. I'm not going to believe that the Detroit Lions have completely turned things around, an organization that has been terrible essentially my entire life, and terrible for most of my dad's life, to be honest with you, is all of a sudden a new breed, a different animal, until we see substantial improvement. And that moment is going to come for Dan Campbell, where the rhetoric and the likability and all this stuff that he talks about, all the things he wants to do, where the sheen of that new hire is going to wear off. And that's not a Dan Campbell thing. That's just a football coach thing. That happens with every coach. It happens with even some really good coaches. The example I always use is Jim Harbaugh. I don't think anyone forgets, but I do think some people misremember just how huge of a deal it was when Jim Harbaugh got hired at Michigan. It was a national news story, not national sports story, a national news story. Harbaugh was coming home. You had the Harbus on Fox. He was all over ESPN. He was all over Barstool. It was a huge, huge deal. And the fans loved it. And you had this weird, quirky dude who says these weird things. And wow, they went 10-3 in year one. Like, they were predicted to be a 7-8 win football team, and they won 10 games. Yes, they lost to Michigan State because Jim Harbaugh forgot to tell his punter to fall on a punt in case he fumbled it, and they got murdered by Ohio State. But hey, there's a talent gap. It's year one. You got to double-digit wins, and whoa, they have a top 5 team coming in this year. Like, they're going to be incredible, and they're 10-0. Okay, that's weird. They lost to Iowa, who's not that good, but Kinnick Stadium's a tough place to play. There is a moment with every coach, regardless of what their rhetoric is like, regardless of how likable they are, there is a moment, sometimes it's in year 2, 3, 4, who knows, where the honeymoon wears off. That moment came the second Michigan lost that game in the Horseshoe in year 2 to Ohio State in double overtime in a game that they should have won. You could say the spot JT was short. They should have had that game in hand well before that play even happened. They didn't get a first down in the fourth quarter, so that one's brutal. The perception of Jim Harbaugh changed after that game. Now it's positive for the most part again. He just won a Big Ten championship, but the perception of Jim Harbaugh being this really weird, quirky guy who's says all these insane things, and he's just a winner. He wins everywhere he goes, and he wins fast. All that changed the second they lost that game to Ohio State. And while the expectations for Dan Campbell are not even remotely comparable to where they were for Jim Harbaugh, that moment's going to come for Campbell. I don't know if it's going to be in year 2. If they don't improve on their win total from a season ago, it will be. I think that there were a lot of grumblings about Matt Patricia when he was in year 2 in Detroit and the way that team finished. And they should have fired him after year 2 because it was a disaster. But I think the moment where everyone collectively just dropped an atomic bomb on that regime was the first game in year 3 when they had this big lead against the Bears, blew it, DeAndre Swift drops a touchdown in the end zone, and then Patricia has this horrible press conference afterwards. Every coach is faced with that defining moment. And as likable as Dan Campbell is, as fun as he is, as awesome as it would be to see him be the guy who leads the Lions back to prosperity, he's going to have that moment in which he'll have to outcoach a Kyle Shanahan, which he's going to have to go toe-to-toe with a Sean McVay in a big game. Or, look at your own division, or Matt LaFleur. That's who you're looking up at. Forget making it to the NFC Championship. That's who you're looking up at in your own division. Whether it happens while Aaron Rodgers is there or not, the Packers are still the gold standard. That's who you got to get past. Is he going to be capable of doing that? I don't know. But for the time being, at least it's interesting to watch. That was a lot more Lions talk than I expected. But we're going to move on to the Tigers here because we had a very interesting week on Tigers social media. I know what the inception of it was. Most people do. This all started when a reporter, and I don't know who it was, forgive me, I don't want to put anybody on blast, though it wasn't a bad question, essentially asked AJ Hinch, do you feel like Torque and Green are ready for opening day? And AJ said, well, they got a lot more to do before they make the opening day roster. And people freaked out, and they took that as AJ saying, oh, well, they got a lot of work to do. That means they're not going to be on the team on opening day, and this is a disaster because I think they're going to be 2 of our best players, and this is ridiculous. Okay, I know I'm the biggest AJ Hinch fanboy alive, but I want to explain to you why what he said is a perfect answer. One of the reasons I like AJ is because AJ Hinch is so freaking consistent with his messaging. From day one, he said, my number one goal is I need to motivate my players to be the best versions of themselves every single day. Well, what the hell kind of message would it send if 2 weeks before spring training is over, you say, hey, you know what? These 2 rookies who haven't played a game in Major League Baseball, they made the team. I know it's going to happen, and these guys don't have to worry, but Robbie Grossman has not been told that he's made the team yet. Jeimer Candelario has not been told that he's made the team yet. Miguel Cabrera, Javi Baez have not been told that they've made the team yet. So the first announcement you're going to make is that 2 rookies who have not played in the major leagues yet, they made the team out of spring camp. That would be terrible. What kind of message would that send to Victor Reyes and Derek Hill, 2 guys who are fighting for outfield spots? Probably backup outfield spots, but outfield spots nonetheless. Yep, keep fighting for it. Like putting two bees in a jar, just keep going at it. Meanwhile, these 2 rookies, they made the team and they can relax for the rest of spring. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, I may look a little bit different. I put on the same shirt just for continuity's sake, but I do not wear the same clothes. I had an event to go to today, so I recorded today's show yesterday. Now, this will happen sometimes. I'm trying to work around this. I really am. I don't want to put myself in a compromising spot, and I don't want to put my producer in a compromising spot, but some news just broke today as the Tigers were playing a spring training game against the Yankees. Riley Green fouled a ball off of his foot. Then a few pitches later, he hit a triple off the center field wall because this guy's just built different. Came out limping, went into the clubhouse with the trainer. X-rays are pending. AJ Hinch had no further information after the game regarding the extent of Riley Green's injury. To be scared about this sucks. Green had been hitting the ball really well in spring training, made an amazing catch yesterday against the Blue Jays, was going to make the team out of camp, and that may be up for grabs now. It could just be a bruise. He could be one of those day-to-day things, but we are a week away from the season now, and we're in that danger zone. We should call Kenny Loggins because we're in that point where even a minor injury could prevent somebody from being available on opening day. I would be very surprised, considering the fact that he hit a triple like the next pitch, if Riley Green was out for an extended period of time here for the Tigers. That would surprise me quite a bit. But people want all the ducks to be in a row on opening day. That's just human nature. There's really nothing wrong with that. Like, I see some people being like, oh, Tigers fans are freaking out. Of course! We have something to look forward to for once in our lives. Wow. It's human nature to be upset. Of course. So, I mean, it is frustrating, right, that a week out of opening day, a guy who many people believe could be a Rookie of the Year candidate, and maybe even more, who's been lighting it up in spring, maybe dealing with an injury. That really, really sucks. And sadly, I've talked about this. Go back through every episode I've done so far. Whenever I talk about the Tigers, I use the words if they stay healthy or pending health all the time. Because on paper, if things played out the way that they should, there would be no reason to play the game. The Los Angeles Dodgers should win the World Series every single year. But last year, Scherzer's arm got a little bit tired. Buehler's, I think, might have done the same, as was Julio Urias. And they kind of fell apart. And then you have a team in the Atlanta Braves who was injured all year, finally finds their footing, they win the World Series. Health is a huge, humongous part of baseball. And this team, I'm talking at the major league level, not so much at the minor league level, but this team at the major league level, I think their roster, I look at it and I say, I think it's going to be a pretty solid roster. But like a lot of other teams out there, they're 2 or 3 injuries away from being not so good. And Green will be a key piece of this baseball team. And I know it's a lot of pressure to put on a young guy, but this team's ceiling will depend on how good those two guys are. I'm not going to say how many wins I think they're going to have. I'm going to save that for next week, but they could overshoot those expectations if those guys are that good. And it's tough to put those guys in a tough spot. And it's difficult, especially when you have a situation like you had today where Riley Green may have been a little bit banged up. I hope he's fine. We'll wait on the x-rays. By the time this gets uploaded, who knows? Maybe the results of the x-rays are going to be found here. Let me check my phone to see if we missed anything. All right, well, nothing doing right now. So as of 4:53 p.m. on Friday, April 1st, the results of Riley Green's x-rays are still pending. I had more that I'd filmed for this episode. I was talking about, Lynn Henning had a tweet storm that upset a lot of people, talking about Green and Torkelson, and we had to pivot here, and that's going to happen. The last few episodes of this show, it's no fault of my producer, Matt, who's done an awesome job and makes me look better than I should. I'm going to have to add a few more layers to this. I'm a really good talker, right? I'm a better talker than I am a blogger, I believe, but I want to add a few more wrinkles to make this the best product it can be, and we're going to run into issues sometimes with this being a Monday, Friday show. Sometimes news is going to break after recording. Sometimes news is going to break right before I record. That will happen. I preach patience. We are still in the infantile stages of this program, and it's only going to grow, and it's only going to be better because I refuse to be a part of something that sucks. All right, so that will do it for today's show. You can follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014. While you're at it, hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Let's get those watch hours up. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. Have a great weekend. Get healthy. Riley Green, enjoy the Final Four. Peace and happiness.